Hi, this is Stephanie Miller from The Stephanie Miller Show. Please enjoy this exclusive clip from my show on Political Voices Network. Carl, speaking of, former Republicans, I know you grew up in a Republican family, so did I. Brian Stelter tweeted, despite long advocating small government and local control, Republican governors and legislatures across a significant swath of the country are increasingly overriding the actions of Democratic cities, removing elected district attorneys or threatening to strip them of power, etc. I keep trying to say this, Carl, this is the danger, whether Trump ends up being the nominee or not. This, again, is a party that is becoming an authoritarian party, a party that does not believe in democracy.
Yeah, I mean, on most election days, there's this guy that comes up to me outside of the polls, and he's like, are you a Democrat? And I say yes, and he says, what, were you raised by wolves? And I say, no, I was raised by Republicans.
That's my book.
And so, I think the risk that we have here is that democracy doesn't matter to them at any level, because they've decided that the fundamental part of our democracy is broken and corrupted, with no evidence to show for it.
Yeah.
And so their attacks on our local schools, their attacks on our, prosecutors, attacks on school boards and local governments are all part and parcel with the attacks on our electoral system and our media and our public education system.
But mostly from Trump on down, they do not want to honor the results of elections they do not like. That's the bottom line.
No,
they want to figure out how to reverse.
Before I'd even been reelected, one of the Republicans leaders in my district was saying, that we're going to start circulating recall petitions the day after the election if we need to.
Oh my God!
It's like, okay,
but that's
if getting a bigger share of the votes and more votes than I did last time wasn't enough to tell you where the voters stand.
Yeah, and then Carl, why do we act like January 6th is any kind of isolated event? I mean, Kerry Lake just lost Arizona again. From whatever appeal that was to the Arizona Supreme Court. I mean, they just, I've never seen this in my lifetime. A fundamental, first of all, just the big government, like that they want to tell everybody how to live. That's the exact opposite of what the Republican Party used to stand for, right?
Well, in fairness to Kerry Lake, my understanding is that she's taking her case to the appraisers of the Antiques Roadshow,
yes.
And that they will make the ultimate decision at a flea market just outside of Tucson.
The thing about you is I hear your jokes coming like a mile away, like a giant train whistle, and they're still funny. When we get there, they're still...
Sometimes the windup is a bit long, but look, there's nothing that will stop it except for defeating them.
Yeah.
Right?
But this is why I always think of you, Carl. I can't keep track of which religious right-wing whack said it, but they were specifically talking about school boards, that, we have to take over the school boards. We've got to, meaning with these religious Handmaid's Tale right-wing zealots. And that is something why, we kept saying we got to compete on every level, and you put your money where your mouth is.
Well, and we had a really good night for school boards across the Commonwealth here in Virginia, except in a few places where they did elect people who are, QAnon conspiracy theorists, January 6th, insurrection supporters, people just like the ones that are being recruited to run. And so, you can see it in the preparations that Trump's people are making, whether or not they come to fruition. I learned a long time ago to always take these things seriously, but Trump's advisors are already actively working on plans for how they're going to, grab power if he's elected, by instituting martial law, through the Insurrection Act, by putting people in the Department of Justice who will use DOJ as a weapon against his enemies, which, by the way, I mean, Santa must be jealous of that naughty list that Trump maintains. He's the only president that I know of who openly talks about having an enemies list.
Yeah. Carl, I think you look cute in every hat, including your school board hat, but every now and again, I ask you to put on your former Democratic strategist hat.
Sure.
And listen to Marie Harf. Harf. I just like to say that because they look for hairballs. They're cat owners. This is her former State Department spokesperson on Fox.
National polls a year out from an election, we should all take them with a little bit of a grain of salt.
Okay, but what about, before you go further, what about the state head-to-head polls with Biden and Trump?
So a lot of those are pretty close still within the margin of error. I would remind people that President Obama, who I worked for in his reelection, had very similar polls against Mitt Romney at the same time. I do think that Democrats should take these polls with some caution, right, as a warning sign. They need to get out there. They need to make the case that we just heard Jared Bernstein making about the economic news that is impacting people every single day.
Yeah, I mean, that is the issue, isn't it? There is there's a divergence on, one set of facts in the first place because they don't seem to, they don't deal in facts. But, I know she's talking about, by every economic indicator, by every indicator, things are. How do we impart that if you were still a Democratic strategist?
Well, and here's the conundrum we're in, right? It's calculated the same way that they calculated it during Trump, that they calculated it under Obama, and so on. And yet, from Trump, all the numbers fake for Joe Biden, even though they're calculated using the same math, the same kind of numbers from the same sources that they did under the Trump administration. So, add that to the long list of things that they think has a liberal bias.
I know. I'm like whistling in the past the graveyard, asking why Fox viewers believe it. How do they sit there and hear Jason Chavez say turkeys are $90 and go, I just paid $20 for my turkey? Like, it's just like things that they provably know are true in their own lives, right?
Well, I think you've got two things. One, you've got this constant desire to own the libs. Mm-hmm. And so anything they can say or do that outrages us makes them happy. Yeah. And I also think that facts at this point don't matter to many people. And, I talk to people all the time about how frustrating it is to for them to try and convince somebody from the other side to change their mind. And these facts don't seem to break through. But they're never going to break through, right? It takes a giant psychological event to change one's politics, to go from one side to the other. And that's why you saw so many people that you would consider to be middle of the road stay with Trump.
Yeah.
Because they can rationalize that, at least I'm getting, a tax cut here.
Yeah. He hates the same people I do. All right, one more, Marie. Harf. Harf. Harf.
About what a Joe Biden second term would look like. They have some work to do, so they should take these as a warning sign. But I firmly believe that Donald Trump has a ceiling on the number of people that will vote for him. We see that in poll after poll. And every time Donald Trump has been at the top of the Republican Party since he won in 2016, Democrats have wildly overperformed. So Democrats sitting here today will say, we hope Donald Trump is the nominee because a Joe Biden-Donald Trump head-to-head is, I think, pretty good for Democrats. I think they're probably a little nervous if it's Nikki Haley or someone else, but elections are choices. Mm-hmm. And I think Democrats are confident that Joe Biden is the only one that's ever beat Donald Trump, and he can do it again.
I think they're all pathetic, including Nikki Haley, but...
Well, you know what they never talk about, though, is how Donald Trump will react if he's not the nominee.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He will...
Speaking of wild cards, yeah.
Nikki Haley will not be running against Joe Biden alone.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
There will be an orange menace in the field as well.
But, it is interesting when you think back, because we all think of Barack Obama as historically successful politically and otherwise, and he was. But when you think back, you're right. I remember those polls with Mitt Romney way ahead of him, and you're like, oh, my God. And
there's a whole documentary about it.
I think even he would say Biden has accomplished more politically and, legislatively than Barack Obama ever did. I mean, I remember him famously talking about the shellacking he took in the midterms, right?
Yeah. Well, and, there's a documentary where Mitt Romney, up until Election Day, was convinced by his pollster that he was going to win. Right. And then he got his rear end handed to him by Obama. And so the nugget I want to elevate from that is the clip you played is that Democrats have been outperforming expectations throughout every election since Trump was elected. It's true, but we can't use that as a reason to rest on our laurels, right?
Right.
We need to be prepared. We need to continue to work just as hard. Look, every election going forward is going to be the most important election of our time.
And I maintain you must maintain the exact level of gastrointestinal distress and confidence that the Stephanie Miller Show imparts every day.
take some Tums, get your absentee ballot in.
Yes.
Go knock on some doors.
Do it.
And know that on the other side of that uncomfortable tummy issue is, a preserved American democracy.
Yeah, that's what you get. His lovely parting gift. You get to keep your democracy. Carl, thanks for doing the Lord's work. I mean, not in a Handmaid's Tale right wing whack kind of way, but in a real way.
Yes.
Yeah.
A way that we can appreciate.
you.
Yes.